Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today, whether that be your morning, your evening, or somewhere else in your time zones. I'm Melissa Babbage, and I'm the Vice Chair of the American Australian Association in the US, although I am now living and working back in Sydney. I'd like to extend a huge welcome to each of our special guests today, Leigh, Sanya, Peter, Ella, and Steve, to our viewers from Citi, our sponsor, and to everyone else that's joining us today. We have people joining from all around the world. We have people from, Leigh is from Connecticut. We have Peter in Perth, Ella up on the Gold Coast, Steve in Brisbane, Sanya in New York. And it just goes to show the diversity and the strength of the relationship across our two nations. Firstly, though, in the spirit of reconciliation, the American Australian Association acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all traditional owners of the lands that each of us work and live on today. I am personally delighted to be associated with the AAA, a non-profit organisation which for over 70 years has developed and strengthened the relationship between Australia and the United States by promoting cooperation, economic growth, and cultural understanding. Our two nations are the greatest of allies and partners, however, enjoy a friendly rivalry on the sporting field, as evidenced on the track, pool, and courts during the recent Olympic and Paralympic Games. I do look forward to hearing and learning from each of our speakers on elite performance and what it takes. Before we introduce our special guests, however, I would first like to introduce Sarah Mccarrion, Vice Chair of Markets and Security Service Australia and New Zealand at Citi, and she's also a fellow AAA board member. I'd like her to say a few brief words. Before I go, I just need to mention that Sanya, of course, is not in New York, she's in Atlanta. And I'm sure she's a proud Atlantan. Sorry about that. Anyway, on behalf of the AAA, our thanks to Sarah and Citi for sponsoring today's webinar, and welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And I'd like to add my welcome to all of you to our virtual event, The Secret of Elite Performance. Citi is very proud to be sponsoring this event as we have both a strong relationship with the American Australian Association and a great partnership with Paralympics Australia. Diversity and inclusion are key imperatives for Citi, and our partnership with the International Paralympic Committee gives us a powerful platform to change perceptions of people with disabilities. Now, I think everybody will remember 2021 for many different things, not all of them positive. However, the achievements of Olympians and Paralympians in Tokyo is something we can all celebrate. I'd like to introduce our panel moderator and host, Leigh Diffey. Leigh is a proud American Australian, similar to me. He was born and raised in Queensland, Australia, and his great love of sport led him to Sydney, then London, and eventually the United States, where he's been based for the past 20 years. Since joining NBC Sports in 2013, Leigh has achieved many firsts in his career. He's the first Australian, actually, in fact, the first foreign voice, full stop, to be lead announcer, play-by-play for Indy 500, followed by the first foreign voice, play-by-play for NASCAR. He is currently one of the most prolific voices in motorsports. Versatility is one of Leigh's many strengths, as he is also NBC's Olympics primary announcer for track and field. He's called numerous summer and winter games, including the 800-meter race starring Peter Bol at the recent Tokyo Olympics, which we all remember as one of the highlights. Prior to joining NBC Sports, Leigh worked as a host and play-by-play commentator for Speed Channel in the US, the BBC in the UK, and Network 10 in Australia. He's also covered a wide variety of different sports, from Formula One to golf, including the Masters, sailing, bobsled, skeleton, luge, and rugby, to name just a few. Welcome, Leigh.
Sarah, thank you very much. And so pleased to be part of this AAA webinar today, because it really is the epitome of what we do as Aussies and as Americans, and this strong bond between the two nations, and how much the two nations really love sport. So let's get to it and meet our four special guest panelists. Peter Bol, who Sarah mentioned, both Sonia and I got the pleasure of commentating his race in Tokyo this year. Peter is a two-time Olympian and also a two-time Australian 800-meter champion, and has quite the story to tell about being born in Sudan, but has been in Australia the majority of his life and has proudly called Australia his home and proudly represents the green and gold. Ella Sabljak is also proudly wearing the green and gold, and she is an Australian Paralympian as recently as just in the past couple of months in Tokyo. She's a multi-time world silver medalist, and as part of the Australian women's wheelchair basketball team, proud representative of the gliders. So we've got a lot to talk about with Ella. One of my teammates at NBC Sports is Sanya Richards-Ross. Son is a four-time Olympic gold medalist, and she is the fastest American woman to ever run 400 meters on the track. She holds that record, proudly holds that record for the last 15 years. And Steve Nance is a high-performance director at FitLab. Steve and I go way back to both of our school teaching days at the Ipswich Boys Grammar School. Steve was too good to stay there, and they nabbed him away, and he became a strength and conditioning coach for teams like the Brisbane Broncos. And the Australian Wallabies recognised him there, and Steve made the Wallabies the fittest they've ever been to win the Wallabies' last ever Rugby World Cup in 1999. So across our four panellists, we've got a lot to talk about. But Peter, I want to start with you first. It's kind of a relatively straightforward question, but I guess maybe a more complex answer. This whole webinar is because we are so intrigued by, and even though I work in the world, I'm still very much intrigued by what makes an elite athlete.
Thanks for the introduction, and that's a great question. I think you couldn't really push it to one thing itself, but there's so many different factors that make an elite athlete. You know, the commitments that we put, the passion that we have, and for the sports and the training that we do, all together makes a great elite athlete. And as well as, I guess, the coaching, if you put it that way, like the coaching staff, that's huge to make an elite athlete. So I credit much of my success to my sport team, which I know athletics seems to be an individual sport, but just within my team, I've got a coach, I've got a manager, I've got a training crew, I've got a sports psychologist, I've got all these different people that I go to, and I'm literally only running like 1 minute and 44 seconds, and you've got all these people that kind of put it together. So those factors make an elite athlete, as well as, you know, the training as well. That's both the physical, the mental, and the gym and the strength training. They all come together to make an elite athlete, but there's so many different factors that you can put together.
Of course, yeah, all the ingredients in the bowl. Ella, how about for you, in your opinion?
Oh, in my opinion, I think, like Peter said, it doesn't, high performance and to be an elite athlete, I think comes from many years of, you know, dedication. And I hate using the word sacrifice because, you know, what we do is a choice. But at the end of the day, it's a sacrifice. And yeah, you just have to work really hard at, if you want something, you've got to go get it. So yeah, I can't stress enough that to be an elite athlete, you have to really, really want it. And so it's not for the faint-hearted. You have to work hard. You know, it's your team behind you as well. Like, I come from a team sport, so it's not only you out there, it's 12 other people, and extending that, you know, where I'm only 1/18 of my team with our staff and coaches and everyone that goes in. So you just have to work really hard for yourself and for your teammates.
Steve, Ella mentioned there about the coaching staff. Can you see the difference between, say, you know, an athlete that is not quite there yet and then an elite athlete?
Yeah, you see it. We see, you know, when I worked at the Broncos or the rugby union, you know, and I worked a lot in schoolboy sport, you see the guys coming through, the girls coming through, and you usually can pick the ones that are going to make it because they've not only got ability, but they've got that desire to put the hard work in. And I've never seen, in the modern era, I've never seen a good team or a good athlete that hasn't been prepared to put in the hard work. And, you know, the 98% of it's hard work. It's a little 1% is where you get that advantage. But in teams, you've got to have as Ella just said, you've got to have everybody on board. And, you know, Peter, I was going to ask you the question before it started, how many support staff does he have? Because you must have all the boxes ticked. It's an adage I know people use, but if you only have to have one weakness in your team and you don't perform very well, and you've got to have everyone on the right page.
And Sanya, what about for you, in your opinion, because you've been in track and field athletics for so long, what makes an elite athlete?
I mean, I echo what Peter and Steve have said. I think that there are a lot of factors. I 100% credit having a great team around you, people who believe in you, pour into you, encourage you. And then I think you have to be resilient. You know, I think that people always think that you just have the talent or you just have the work ethic. Well, no, there are a lot of things that can knock you off your block, whether that's injury or disappointment. I think you just have to be relentless and resilient when you desire to be the best in the world. And so, you know, it all has been said. I think Peter did a great job kicking us off with his comments of what it takes to be an elite athlete. And I would just add that resiliency and, you know, that I refuse to lose mentality is what I think separates, you know, the good from the greats. Is, you know, we just refuse to quit. We refuse to lose, and eventually you come out on top.
So Ella, what happens? We've had some of the webinar viewers and our guests send in some questions, and this was a good one. Ella, what happens on the days when you don't want to get out of bed?
Oh, there are many of those days, trust me. I would say the weather on the Gold Coast is a deterrent to get out of bed at 5 a.m., but it's not. So honestly, there are no excuses. You just have to get up. And I'm really lucky that my partner, he plays wheelchair basketball as well. So we have each other to be able to, get up. Come on, we have to get up. Like, we're not only, I don't know, I don't want to say letting ourselves down, but we are, if we don't get up and get those sessions in, because we both live really busy schedules. We both work full time, and if we don't get our sessions in, we don't have another chance to be able to train. And being an elite athlete, I think we train more than we play. I think for the Paralympic Games, we played a total of 5 or 6 games. And upon reflection, I'm like, it's a lot of work for just 6 games. And you just have to get up.
Get up and get at it. Hey, Sanya, Ella is going to be married to an elite athlete next year as well, Matt McShane, who's part of the Australian men's wheelchair team, the Rollers. So you are married to an elite athlete as well in Aaron Ross, a 2-time Super Bowl winner. How much does that help you ladies? Like, how much does it help you as part of they've got their own stuff to do, but how much does that help you and your support team for your drive and your goal?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations, Ella. Very happy for you.
Thank you.
And, I think it was a dream come true to have my partner, the love of my life, be someone who really understood the commitment that it took to being great. It's really hard sometimes for people who don't understand when you have this childhood dream that you're tracing for 20 years, when you go to bed early and you're eating right, but when the person has that same drive and commitment, it just makes it so much easier. And, he also always understood what I was going through. When I suffered a loss or when I was going through injuries, he experienced it as well. And so it was just amazing to have that person in my corner, in my home, who I could just, I didn't have to say things sometimes, just the look, and he would know exactly what I needed. And, it's really special to be able to share something that you love so much with the love of your life. And I'm sure you'll have a similar experience, Ella. And I think it will continue to push you guys. You were talking, Leigh, about what the motivation is. And I do think a lot of times that comes from your team. It's the people who you've told what you want to do and what you want to achieve that hold you accountable. And I feel like there were days when I was down where Ross would be like, no, remember that vision board that you created, that gold medal you want to win? You got to get up and get out there. And I think that helps a lot, especially when the person has similar goals to you.
Peter, we had a question forwarded very kindly. How do you feel about being an ambassador to motivate migrants to Australia to achieve more and to get into the sporting world and maybe to the elite level. And for those who maybe don't know your backstory, you were born in Sudan and your family fled Sudan. You came to Toowoomba when you were a young kid, went to school there for a little bit, and then went to Perth. Offered a basketball scholarship. Basketball turned into track and field, and here you are as a two-time Aussie champ and two-time Olympian. Do you feel that sense of pride for the migrant community?
Absolutely. I feel a lot of pride for my background, both South Sudanese and Sudanese, but at the same time, embrace the whole Australian culture. And it's funny because I don't really see myself as an ambassador, as a role model. And like after Tokyo, with all the hype and everything that happened, and I just figured I got to keep doing what I've been doing and not to think too much outside the box. And if people look up to it, that's great. And if people follow it, I'm happy to embrace it. But at the end of the day, the one thing I learned as being an athlete is to continue being yourself. No matter if you have successes or failures, you can't change just because someone else giving you a different role. So if I'm naturally an ambassador, naturally a role model, then that's what I'm going to keep doing and just be myself, really.
It might be something that you bathe in a little bit more once you're retired, and you've got more time to reflect, because you're not doing a lot of reflection at the moment. You're still in the mode. Hey, Steve, an interesting one in that some of the elite athletes or coaches who have been exposed by family members or maybe even themselves with some military involvement. I know that your brother was in the military. How much did he impact on you in the way that you had a high performance mind and you had to then lay that into your athletes and that mindset? Was there any influence there?
Yeah, well, he was only a year older than me, but he was always a high achiever and ended up being a lieutenant colonel in the SAS in Australia, and very interested in fitness and sport like I always was. But and I did a lot of training with the military places that he went to. I actually took the Brisbane Broncos and the Wallabies to train over at the SAS base in Perth. But I think a lot of the discipline in the military is needed, especially in team sports. Just things like just being on time for buses and being on time for meetings and having the right kit. And it really rammed it home when I was with the Australian side, because it was very important we had that culture of doing everything properly. And once we started to do everything properly, we started to win. And it related to a whole lot of things. And I think that military, my brother ended up being in charge of security at Rio and London for the Australian team. And I think they brought that in because of his military background.
Ella, how important is mindset and the right mindset, and what does that mean?
Well, mindset for me is something that we can all control. So, and it's a practice. You can't just wake up and be like, I'm gonna, whatever it is. You have to continually practice those thoughts. And I think it all comes down to the language that we use and how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to other people. So in my classroom, and I guess this is a topic that's been sort of brought around the last couple of years, is a growth mindset. So it's all about, I may not be able to do it now, but because I'm not there yet, and sort of like using the power of yet, which means that we do have the potential to reach whatever it is that we want to reach. And I think for me, and it's a practice. Like some days, like waking up in the morning to get out of training, like I don't want to do it, but you're like, well, it's a constant grind, and having those thoughts about getting up and getting the job done. And we can have our low days, and we can have our good days and our okay days, but we have to constantly keep reminding ourselves that I have to keep working hard, and having that growth mindset about if I just challenge myself, or if I try, or whatever it is, we don't know what we could achieve, because I don't want to sit here and wonder what could have been. I said to one of my teammates coming into Tokyo maybe about 2 years ago now, and she was on the cusp of our team, and I said to her, I go, well, which girl do you want to be? Do you want to be sitting on the couch watching us, or do you want to be there with us in Tokyo helping us? And she's like, oh, yeah, it just triggered something for her to be able to get up and work harder, and it ignited that fire in her belly. But yeah, it's all about like the language that we use and how we talk to ourselves. And if we sit here and I say, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough yet. So it's just that constant grind and that constant work and determination.
Sanya, if you are you're at your physical peak, but if you don't have the right mindset, can you still achieve? Can you still win?
I don't think so. I think that for me, in my own experience, I feel like, especially when it's time for mental portion is the most important. When you stand on 400, I was in Beijing, everyone there is tuned, everyone is great and prepared and, capable of doing great things. But I think it's the person who can stay mentally tough and strong and execute that is able to really bring out their best and, most likely have their best performance. And so, Peter mentioned this, and I started working with a sports psychologist midway through my career. I wish I would have worked with him the entire time. And I think it was as critical as finding a great coach on the track, having someone to help me to train my mind for excellence. And once I started learning those techniques and doing the visualization and started having positive thoughts, it just completely changed the game for me. I was able to produce on the track at major competitions what I was doing in practice. So I think they go hand in hand. I think we saw a lot of this in Tokyo, right? It was the first time where athletes spoke out and really talked about how challenging it can be, the mental pressure and weight that you feel when you stand on the floor for gymnastics or on the track or whatever, your competitive arena is. It's very difficult. And so I think it's very important as an athlete or as an individual to spend as much time cultivating your mindset as you are cultivating that physical skill set and work together.
Steve, you've also trained track and field athletes. So from a single individual all the way up to 15 on the field for rugby players plus the substitutes. So you've gone from an individual to maybe more than 20. How do you handle that mindset game with such extremes?
Oh, look, I think it's the same, Leigh. The bottom line is that the athletic teams that I looked after were mainly school-based, and we're a team. So we looked at ourselves as being a part of the school, not just an individual. And the individuals made up the team, but it was a team camaraderie that actually drove a lot of the young guys on. And it was the same sort of thing. You had to manage different training volumes and training loads, and you had young boys 12 years old and other boys up to 18 years old. There was a big difference, but there's the same principles applied. It's just that you didn't all compete at the same time, which is a big difference. And they competed all day, which is a bit like a cricket game. It went on all day, but rugby's over in 80 minutes. You get into it, have a half time, and you get into it again. And but this preparation is virtually the same, really.
But the power of the mindset and the power of the mind, as you well know, is something truly special, because whilst you're known globally for your achievements with strength and conditioning coach, I actually witnessed you coaching in France, a rugby team, fluent in English, fluent in French. So when you had to go to work each day, knowing that you had to address the team in French, that's a little bit different for a guy from New South Wales. So how did you tackle that?
Well, I had nightmares learning French, don't you worry. I spoke French and I still do with a terrible Australian accent, but I can get by. But yeah, look, that was a challenge. That was a big challenge, and it's hard enough to get your message across when everyone speaks the same language. When we had Americans, we had French, Italians, English, South Africans, Australians, all in the one team. And I remember I did a coaching for the Swiss rugby team, and they spoke 4 languages in Switzerland. And I had to give it in French because there was a lot of English-speaking guys there, but there were more French-speaking guys. So it was difficult, but yeah, you get over it.
Peter, is having the right mindset like having a car in the right gear or a bicycle in the right gear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think mindset is basically everything. And to exercise that mindset, you have to do the physical part. And I think your mindset develops and you get confidence by doing the physical part. But still, at the end of the day, we're training for like 4 years for an event, and you line up at the track. And to make it even worse, everyone on that start line is thinking they're going to win, but there can only be one winner. So it's a tough one to kind of judge, but it comes with a lot of experience. Like I always say, from Tokyo to Rio, one of my mindset development was just experience, having more international events and getting out there a lot more. But also, like you speak about motivation and getting out of bed, it's probably like getting out of bed is one thing, and then training with intent is another thing. You know, your great mindset would be not just getting out of bed, but going to training and training with intent and setting some goals at the same time. So to develop that, I think that's what separates the elite and the high performance from normal athletes. Like, do you want to be at the games as a passenger, or do you want to be a competitor? And, you know, whichever one you choose, there's different mindsets for it. And, you know, if you want to be the top of the elites, you have to train with intent. You have to have the right goals, and you have to have the right support team. And I say to kids, especially, like when you're competing early, when you're young, it's probably the best thing is to have a strong support team along your friends, because if one's not motivated, then at least maybe one of the five might be motivated. But if the whole five aren't motivated, then you probably need a different group of friends. So, and that's the way I kind of tackled it.
All right, let's deal with the big A word, adversity. Sanya, Beijing, you were the favorite to win gold in the women's 400. It didn't happen. You win bronze. So then, instead of crying in your soup, you re-racked for another 4 years, and you come back in London and you win gold. How did you do that? How did you respond from such severe adversity?
Yeah, you know, Leigh, that was by far the most difficult experience in my career. To go into Beijing, having worked so hard, I was undefeated all season, heavily favored to win gold, and was prepared to win gold. Felt like it was going to be my time. And, you know, I remember when I was 9 years old writing for my class assignment that I would be an Olympic champion, and I felt like this was the time. And when it didn't happen, it was so crushing. You kind of feel like you just want to disappear. You don't get a do-over, you know, that's just it. You cross the finish line, and, you know, the moment you cross the line, you know, like you have to wait 4 more years for this opportunity. And to go to one Olympics is, you know, already a daunting task. And to try to make now my 3rd Olympic team, you know, in that moment, it was really difficult for me to see that might happen again. But every single day, I just used it as motivation. You know, it was like, it didn't happen then, but it's gonna happen next time. And I did everything that I could to prepare myself mentally and physically for London. And, you know, it was literally like running into my fairy tale ending when I finally won that individual gold in London. And, you know, you stand on the podium, people say it all the time, it's like your life flashes before your eyes. And, you know, in that moment, you think, man, all of it was worth it. The training, the adversity, everything that I went through to now be the best in the world at something. It's really hard to describe that feeling. But, you know, like I said in the beginning, Leigh, I think that's what separates, you know, the good from the great. It's that you embrace the failures because you know that it's a recipe, a part of the ingredients to success. Like, you go back to the drawing board, you figure out what you did wrong, and you're knocked down, but not for long. You get back up and you fail forward. And I think, you know, I had a great team around me that saw that I had the potential to do it, and they continue to believe in me, and, you know, it happened. And I'm still so grateful that I had those experiences, all of them, the good and the bad.
So Aussie legend and fellow 400 meter Olympic gold medalist Cathy Freeman, she said, if the heart, the mind, and the spirit all align, the body will follow. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And, you know, Cathy Freeman is one of my heroes. You know, I'll never forget watching her win Olympic gold in her home country in that incredible suit. And I know, you know, we're just talking about mental toughness to be able to do what she did on that day. You know, she deserves all the credit in the world to be able to carry her country on her back the way she did, and to run, you know, the race of her life. It was absolutely incredible. And, you know, I admired her for many, many years, and she's absolutely right. You know, when everything's aligned, when you've done all the work, you just step on the track and you just believe and you go for it. And she was definitely a great role model for, and definitely one of my role models.
Ella, tell us about what it's like training for 4 years. And we can't stress that enough. 4 years. And then something that you've been working for doesn't happen. I'm talking about Rio 2016. So then you and the rest of the ladies have to regroup and say, Who's up for another 4 years to try and make it to Tokyo? What's that like?
Oh, honestly, the past 8-10 years have been the hardest of my life. Yeah, so what you're talking about is back in 2015, our Australian wheelchair basketball team, we failed to qualify for the Rio Paralympic Games. And that would have been my first games. And I was still quite young in the team. We had just come off winning a silver medal at our junior championships. And you know, there was a few of us that were in that junior team, and we'd come across to the senior team, and the emotions that we were feeling after not qualifying. I remember in the game we missed a layup. We missed a couple of layups to be able to level with China, and the crushing moment of looking up at the scoreboard and seeing, because we only had one spot for our zone to qualify, so we had to win that gold medal game to be able to go through. And it was devastating, honestly. Like I was quite young in the team at the time, so I don't think I quite understood the severity of it then. And I'm just like, I was a little bit confused with how some of the reactions of the senior girls in the team that were going, can we go to another tournament to get us through, or this, and we're trying to figure out like other ways that we could try and qualify. And that was it. There was no more. So we had to go home, and that's when we started our rebuilding phase. And it's been a really big grind. Like our team has been really, since then, we've been hit hard with a classification mishap with our International Paralympic Committee. They've revisited our classification system. And so people that we had in our team that were promising young athletes were deemed ineligible to play in the Paralympic Games because they were seen as not disabled enough. And so we went from, building and rebuilding to a really promising young team to having, 2 of our young superstars taken away, and trying to regroup the team and trying to get everybody on board when we know we're not going to be that successful coming into Tokyo, but we're going to be competitive, and we had to shift the way that we were thinking. Like we obviously wanted a gold medal, but we knew that it was unachievable against the US and the Netherlands and these powerhouse countries. So we just had to refocus and the little steps along the way and celebrate the little wins, because our team had such a big a big thing that's happened to it. So I guess from 2016 or 15 to now, we've focused on the fundamentals, and we've focused on how can we as a team be better and not win, because we're not focusing on the word win, because as soon as you focus on the word winning, you take away the process. So we wanted to focus on the process, and that comes down to our chair skills, our mindset, our life outside of basketball, because unfortunately basketball doesn't pay the bills. So we have to have all of these steps put in place so that we can be successful. And revisiting that word success, it wasn't winning a gold medal, it was Tokyo. We're in Tokyo now. What are we going to do? How are we going to be successful in Tokyo? And they were the little wins. Like we'd try and out rebound a team, or we'd try and minimize our turnovers. All of the things that we could control, we were controlling. So for us, like if we think about basketball, if you think about Tokyo, it was, even though we came 9th in the world, not, podium, which the kids at school continually remind me. They're like, "Miss, you didn't win a gold medal." I'm like, "Thank you. I know that." But I'm like, well, we have the conversation about what success is, and all the hard work that you have to put in to be able to get there. And yeah, so it's been a massive rebuilding phase since 2015, and I feel like this has been the longest journey of my life, but it's been worth it.
Not giving up, not giving up. Peter, I've got two questions to ask you. The first one, and this is still under the topic of adversity. How do you deal with adversity? So in Tokyo, you already have a huge accomplishment by making the Olympic final in the men's 800 meters. You lead maybe the majority of the race in the men's 800 meters, but you do not finish on the podium and you do not get an Olympic medal. Most would think that finishing fourth at the Olympics was a massive success. Do you view it that way, or do you view it that as a little bit of adversity and having to deal with that? And I've got a follow-up question.
Yeah, I think it was a major success for the country, especially from my story, from my background, and for the community back home. But at the end of the day, I still went there to win gold, and for me, that's the part of high performance. You know, believe it or not, like everyone's proud, everyone's like fourth, but you only know what your goal is, and you know when you came short. So for me, it was kind of tough because there was so much support back home, and I didn't want to feel like I was ungrateful for it, but at the same time, it was still disappointing. So yeah, I think dealing with that is number one is to literally just take time and let it kind of just hit you, and let it kind of there. So with adversity, I think it does take time sometimes. So and number two is you talk to the support team and you see what you need to do next. Straight away after that race, I think you go back home, watch it, and I approach my races, win or loss the same way, in that regards, by writing 3 things that I did well and 3 things I could improve on. And that way, it's a growth mindset, and you can kind of keep growing whether you win or whether you lose. And yeah, so for me, no, that was disappointing, but it wasn't as disappointing as not making the final, in a sense, and at the same time, I was more at peace because I ran it the way I wanted to run it. So had I run it a different way, I think it would have been a lot more disappointing.
So you didn't wait too long, because you then go to Poland and you beat Patrick Dobek, the guy who beat you to the bronze medal. So did you use that as motivation?
Yeah, definitely. My motivation was to go to Europe, was already to prepare for next year, because next year we have World Championships and 2 weeks later we've got the Commonwealth Games. So that was my main motivation. My motivation wasn't to focus on Patrick Dobek or to focus on the people that beat me. It was literally to focus on next year, because after championships, you're in such a high that you drop pretty down low. And I wanted to see how well I can sustain after Olympic Games and going back to Europe to do that, because we have to do that next year for the Commonwealth Games. So I'm already thinking about next year. I'm already thinking of ways that I can improve next year. And yeah, I had to just kind of refocus and get back on it straight away. Like, because literally the person that wins on the day is the person that's most focused. When you're standing at the start line, there's not many people physically ahead of you. It's literally the mental things, and literally when it just all comes together. And when things just come together for an athlete, it's the most beautiful thing. And you try to kind of like, reflect in how it all came together and stuff like that. Like that semi-final, or the heats, it was just such an easy run. And my coach's like, why aren't you running across the line? You could have ran 1:43. It's like, well, it's not really about the time there. It's just about getting the job done and being happy out there.
Steve, I remember back in several years ago in Super Bowl 50, my team is the Carolina Panthers here in the US, and they were one of the teams to beat in all of the NFL. They make it to the Super Bowl, only to lose to Denver. This year in the NRL, the Melbourne Storm, once again, the team to beat, they don't even make it to the grand final. How do you pick a team of individuals up and say, come on, let's go. Let's get over this. There's another goal to achieve.
Oh, you can't always win. You'd like to think every time you take the field you're going to win, but you can't. It's, in team sports, it's very difficult. I mean, I've been involved in teams, professional teams that won nearly every game in the season and won the competition. I've been involved in professional teams that only won 2 games the whole season. And it's a different mindset and a different place to be. It's much nicer to come into the organisation on a Monday morning after you've won on the weekend than after you've lost. But to answer your question, teams like the Melbourne Storm are very professional, and they'll get up. They were the best team all year. I don't care what anyone says. For those people in America, it's your equivalent to American football. But the Rugby League Championship ended up being a final between 2 teams. It was a great game, but it wasn't the best team as far as I was concerned. Didn't play in the final. but they'll get back up next year. They have to. They've got a good coach. They've got a good organisation. And that's what you need. I mean, you'd like to, as I said, you'd like to win all the time, but you just can't. As long as the good coaches are the ones that come off and say, look, you did your best. You might have come up a few points short, but you did your best today. And the staff put everything into it. You guys got them fit enough, and you got your medical staff got them all in the field. But we're just a little bit short today. I hate seeing coaches go off when you don't win, even though you've done very well. And I also hate to see teams win that haven't done very well. I hate to see that when they haven't put the time and effort in, which does sometimes happen.
Sanya, we often hear athletes, particularly in track and field, during their interview, whether it be for win or lose, they say, well, I just have to continue to trust the process. What is the process?
is different for everybody, but I think ultimately when people say that, it is that success is not like a rocket ship. It is a roller coaster for everybody, and you will have highs and lows. And it is the person who is resilient and will continue to push through no matter what happens that does eventually have that success, which we all define for ourselves. And so I think for trusting the process for a lot of people means I may not have the win on today, but I believe that I'm one step closer to that win for myself. And, I think that when I look back on my career, it was certainly a process. It was certainly a journey. And, in the moments where it was hard to trust the process, I'm grateful for my team that kept helping me to see the bigger picture. And so I think the process is just going through the good times and the bad times, changing what needs to be changed, finding new ways to stay motivated and enjoying what you do. I think that's, for me, was the main thing, was when the pressure got too much and I started to kind of fall out of love with running. When I went back to my why and to falling in love with just purely running was when I was always at my best. And I think that sometimes we lose that in the process. And I think once you inject back that joy and you find your why and whatever it is you're doing, then you eventually find that success again. So, I think the process is just going through the highs and the lows, making the appropriate changes and just never giving up until you achieve what it is that you set out to achieve.
Ella, Sanya brings up a good point. Have you ever fallen out of love with the sport that is your life?
Yeah, lots. Actually, it's a lot of, I think I've said this, it's a lot of bitter and not a lot of sweet. So we do a lot of hard work and we don't get a lot of reward from it. Being in, we train constantly and we only get, a couple of games here and there. And so finding that motivation to want to train sometimes is really difficult because why am I here? Like, the competition is, so low. At the end of the year and you're at the start of the year, and I think you just have to pull yourself back and refocus and be like, well, this is a stepping stone, and going back to the process. It's all part of the process to be able to, play and succeed when we are competing, because that's why we play in sport, to compete. We don't do this to train. I know that I'm not a huge fan of training, but you've got to find that love and the little things along the way that help us, and that's part of the process as well. And finding your why, I think, is huge. Why am I here? What am I doing here? And having those little focuses along the way to help us achieve the end goal, which is to compete, which is why we do it and why we love it. Because if you get caught up in all of the other stuff, you're going to hate it. Which I've sometimes gone to a basketball court and sat there and be like, this sucks. But, you have to refocus and pull yourself back in and just find your love.
Peter, have you ever found yourself losing focus?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you address it?
Yeah, probably, especially during times of adversity and when you don't achieve a goal, you kind of lose a lot of motivation. But it's also understanding that motivation kind of fluctuates. You can't really depend on motivations in sports. You got to find a sustainable sustainable solution for that. And for me, addressing that is literally by reevaluating my goals, setting those really smart and I guess really realistic goals, because if you don't really set realistic goals, you kind of set yourself up for adversity at the same time, because you kind of keep falling and you can only fall so many times before picking yourself up. And the issue is falling down is you don't want to stay down for too long. You want to stay down long enough that you can reflect and embrace it all. But if you stay down long enough, especially in track and field, it's not like a sport team where you can start the season late and just sit on the bench, or it's like I can't run an 800 meter and say sub 400 meters in. So you get exposed pretty early. So you have to make sure you just got to be on it, and being on it means literally just keep going. And I guess the question about falling out of love with the sport, no, I think it's more disappointment. If you're falling in love out of it, then you probably need to address it. If you're falling in love too much out of it. But if it's just disappointment, you got to know if you're completely not enjoying it. Sometimes you might have to take some time off. You might have to take a little bit of time off to fall back in love with it. But if it's just disappointment, it's part of the game, and you just understanding that it's just part of the game, it's sometimes enough. And then you can kind of just go through it.
By the way, one of our viewers sent in a question. They want to know, even though you're talking to us from Perth right now, they said you've been all over Australia, Toowoomba, Perth, Melbourne. Where do you really feel at home? Is it Melbourne? I guess they might be from Melbourne.
I was thinking about that the other day, and I think I'm a global citizen, because I'm in Melbourne for maybe 5 to 6 months. I'm in Perth 2 months, and I'm in a small city in Germany called Tübingen. So I've just learned to adapt to being just a global citizen of the world, I guess. But I do feel a lot at home when my family's here, and I don't have to cook much and my mom's around. And Melbourne, I feel like it's a training place. It's like where I focus and do all my training. And then overseas is like where I'm ready to compete. So if I'm going to Europe, I'm in good shape. I would never go to Europe if I'm just out of shape or thinking I'm out of shape, so all of these have to come together. And that's part of the mindset that you have to have. I have to be in Perth early during the season, because again, you do everything based on your values. And your values make you happy. So my value is family. So if I'm in Perth, I'm getting that. I'm happy and I'm ready to train, and that's really important. So even when COVID hit, the first thing I did was book a flight the next morning and go to Perth, because I knew that's where I wanted to be with family if I wasn't training. And then Melbourne is like, let's get to work, and Europe is like, all right, now we're ready.
It's been some really important messages for all of you watching, wherever you are in the world. These are applicable to life and to business. Steve, I want to come to you. I've sat beside Addo Bolden and Sanya Richards-Ross for years now in the commentary booth at track and field stadiums all over the world. And you hear them and the athletes we're commentating on talk about my coach. Well, coach said this, coach said that, coach, etc. And it's just such an indelible link and such a valuable relationship and partnership, for all of the years and for where you've worked all around the world, and whether it be with track and field or with rugby teams, etc. What makes a good coach, and why is a good coach a good coach?
Well, I interviewed Wayne Bennett, who's a very famous coach in Australia. He just signed a new contract with a new franchise out here. And I asked him that exact question, what makes a good coach? And he said, you've got to have feeling for your players. You've got to have thoughts for their lives and their careers, and they've got to be able to trust you, and so you trust them. And I think that's important. I think it's have that empathy. You have autocratic coaches that yell and scream and stuff, and I've worked with them. But the ones that are the best, the two best I've worked with are Rod Mcqueen, who's the Wallabies coach when we won the World Cup. The effort he put in to a team that the years before, we were getting 50 and 60 points put on us by the Springboks and the All Blacks. And he, basically the same team we won the World Cup with. So it's got to be something to do with the coaching and the coaching staff. And Wayne Bennett is the longest serving coach in Australia. He's a bit like a lot of the coaches at Manchester United and Dallas Cowboys coaches. They were there for a long while, and I know he based himself along those models, but he's been successful because he gets the players to trust in him and trust what he wants to do. And I think that's important. I mean, I like to think that, you know, you don't want to have a big stick approach, you know, belting guys all the time and saying, you know, you've got to do this or else. They've got to take ownership of what they're doing. And once you can get that ownership and education that what you're doing is going to help them win, it's going to help them play longer and play better, then I think that you've achieved your goals.
Son, how about longevity? What, you know, you had a terrific career. What are the keys to longevity?
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. You know, I was very fortunate I started competing when I was 7. And I was early, you know, a lot of factors, I think, like always ask, like, how did I learn that fast in high school and continue going? And, you know, I think that always about you, right? They're going to always make the right choices for you. So even through college and through my entire career, I was never over-raced. My dad was always a huge part of my career. So, you know, it was never about the money. It was never about anything other than me just fulfilling my potential. And I think that they really helped to guide me to make sure I had a physical therapist. I had a physical therapist my entire professional career that traveled with me and took care of my body. Eating was always a priority for me since I was in high school. I put great fuel in my body to be able to keep healthy. And so I think it was really the small things that I always really focused on: rest and rehab and prehab and, you know, all of those things that I think really helped to prolong my career. And you know, and I'm so grateful. You know, Coach Hart would always say you can do all the right things, but you just need a little bit of luck to have success. And I think I was lucky as well to have the right people around me, the right work ethic, and this great desire to be great. And, you know, it really allowed me to do what I love to do for a very long time and get to see the world and friendships. I value than anything. I think, you know, it was really just really focusing on the small things and having a great team around me.
Ella, how important is the word accountability?
Very important. I think that word holds a lot of weight, not only to an individual, but you need to be held accountable for your own actions. And to do that is you need to have a look at yourself and have really an honest conversation with yourself about, you know, your behavior and what it is that you do to be accountable. Because I think being a part of a team, like I said earlier, I'm not just me. So I'm accountable for me, but I'm also accountable for everybody else in this team. Because if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, the next person can't do their job well. So accountability, like training, so showing up and, you know, having intent and purpose in our training, being accountable with our diet, taking care of ourselves, resting, all of those things, I think we have to be accountable. And in a team sport, you can always tell if somebody hasn't done the work. I think it's highlighted and shown quite, it's really quite evident. And so in a team sport, we all hold each other accountable. So if you see your teammates slacking, you'll be like, hey, like, is there anything we can do to help you get to where we need to be? So it's all about, you know, the team. It's never a personal or a, you know, it's never a personal attack on someone. It's always, you know, holding someone accountable for the behavior rather than their actions, or like a personal attack or whatever it may be. But I think to be accountable, you have to have that honest conversation with yourself. And I know I do quite a lot, and I'll reflect on, you know, the day, what I did that day. And if I haven't done something right, I feel like, you know, I'm letting someone down, or, you know, the team. And so if I've done, you know, all the right things, and, you know, I've slept, I've got enough rest, I've, you know, eaten well, I've not only shown up to training, but I've, you know, competed at training, and I've tried my best, and I'm trying to be my best. I think that's the best kind of accountability that we can have.
Steve, you've always been a big advocate of accountability. You have your players or athletes show up, turn up, and be ready to work, right?
Accountability is the most important thing. It applies to coaches too. Everyone's got to be accountable, and if, as Ella just said, if someone is not accountable and doesn't do the right thing, especially in team sports, you only have to have one person not on their game because they've been out late, or they haven't fueled properly, or they're dehydrated, or whatever the case may be, or they just haven't got their mind on the job on that day. You won't win. You'd be lucky if you do. You can't carry people. It's, that old adage, you're strong as the weakest link. And the team is made up a lot of eyes, but it's we together that performs. And if you don't have that mentality that you, like Ella just said, you've got to be accountable to yourself, but you've got to be accountable to your team and your coach. Otherwise, you just don't perform very well.
All right, Peter, we gave you the opening word, so we're going to give you the closing word before Melissa says a few closing remarks. How key is confidence?
Confidence is probably the difference between getting out of the heats and making the final. Literally, it's just that important. It's, you can do all the training, but if you rock up there doubting yourself on the start line, you're not really gonna perform. So confidence is just so powerful, so important, and you build confidence from the training that you do, from believing and trusting yourself, and believing and trusting the support team around you, because no one gets there by themselves. As much as everyone sees that sometimes it might be individual sport, there's a lot of people out there that's helping you. And I speak about not seeing my coach for 7 months, but somehow, when he sends me that training program, it's not that I don't question him. It's like that trust and that belief, and he's trust also that I'm going to do it, that, and give him feedback. So confidence probably, if not, confidence and mindset, most important, because the physical stuff is what we enjoy. The physical sport is like the joys of sport. That's what we got into the sport, and the mental stuff is what we find out later on, that, man, this stuff is really important when you're putting yourself against the rest of the world. So yeah, you got to build confidence. It's super important.
Self-belief is key. All right, you're done with me. Here's the boss. Here's Melissa.
Thank you so much, Leigh. Unbelievably well hosted panel. Thank you so much to our panelists, Sanya, Peter, Ella, Steve. I have to say that, the American Australian Association has a mantra, if you want, which is about connect, grow, learn, and inspire. And truly, I think you as a panelist and you, Leigh, in terms of the questions and what we've been able to draw out today around passion, around mindset, around alignment and support, is truly so inspiring. And for us kind of mere mortals, it really gives something that I think can all take away and apply to our daily lives. And so for that, I'm extremely grateful to have had the opportunity to have you on the panel today. The Australian American Association is a philanthropic organisation, and we focus across business, across graduate, veterans, and arts education scholarships. And we have today given out more than $10 million of educational scholarships between Australia and the US, students going both ways, something that we're very, very proud of. It's exciting today to have added in this new element to what we do. And I think we will, look for other opportunities to continue to incorporate that. I would just say to our viewers, if you have not been familiar with the AAA before, please do go check us out on the americanassociation.org website. And you'll see a lot about our programs and also the ability to donate should you so be inclined. But again, thank you very much to everyone. I got a lot to think about now, and thanks very much.